People think that if you're talking about race, that you're actually talking about everything after the 18th century and the transatlantic slave trade. So there is this sort of misconception that race was invented during that period. And so when you go farther back and you look at the pre-modern era, particularly around Shakespeare's time and the Tudors, which is seen as a golden age, really, and it has been held up to the highest standards of nostalgia, it's becomes a very uncomfortable conversation. So my name is Farah Kareem Cooper, and I am Director of Education at Shakespeare's Globe, and I'm also Globe Professor of Shakespeare Studies at King's College London. We've launched the Shakespeare Centre London, and attached to that is the Early Modern Scholars of Colour Network, which we launched.
Incredibly valuable project, just because it makes the university and it makes the theatre both widely accessible to many publics and to many communities who don't otherwise feel welcome in these spaces. And I think that's a very kind of tangible instance of creating inclusivity.
I guess I've got quite like a unique position between the two institutions because I got the collaborative doctoral award funding from LAP. It's between like King's and Shakespeare's Globe.
I'm Lucy Munro and I'm Professor of Shakespeare and Early Modern Literature at King's College London. The Shakespeare 400 collaboration really came out of a cluster of research interests among people, primarily in the English department. Well, the partnership with the Globe actually goes back over 20 years, actually when I was a PhD student at King's. And it originally came out of a collaboration at MA level and a joint programme, the MA in Shakespearean Studies, which was set up. I've been on the Architecture Research Committee at the Globe and was part of the group of collaborators who worked on the Playhouse, a project that was led by Farah and really wouldn't have happened without Farah.
I launched the Anti-Racist Shakespeare webinar series in May of 2021, which did attract quite a few. We had something like 400 people, and it also attracted a lot of negativity from people who don't think that we should be talking about race and Shakespeare.
My other favourite things was seeing some of the things that the Globe put together for Shakespeare 400, which was the screens up and down the Thames with specially filmed extracts from a whole range of different plays going right the way up and down the South Bank. And with the Globe being on the South Bank, King's being on the North Bank, there's always that nice sense that we're kind of looking across the river at each other. And that was a really lovely thing to see. And then also the exhibition that we did in collaboration with the National Archives by me, William Shakespeare. The moment at the launch of the exhibition when we were able to see the documents actually in situ, and the fact that we had Shakespeare's will at King's.
My name is Elizabeth Scott-Bowman and I'm a reader in early modern literature at King's College London. I'm a poetry expert, so one of the most exciting aspects of the collaboration between King's and the Globe for me has been a focus on Shakespeare's poems as well as his plays, and also the work of contemporary poets in responding to Shakespeare, so thinking about how his poetry can be inspiring, but also how we might want to challenge some of his ideas, particularly about identity in the present day. In 2016, as part of a major festival to mark the 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's death, I worked with Hannah Crawforth and the Royal Society of Literature, and we commissioned contemporary poets to write back to Shakespeare's sonnets. We really wanted to reach a wider audience with Shakespeare's poetry in the way that the Globe does with his plays. So we also worked with a network of inner London schools, with academics running creative workshops in those schools.
In the Sam Wanamaker Playhouse at the Globe, which is a very, a perfect venue for anything really. And we had a reading from an American poet, Terence Hayes, from his amazing collection of sonnets. And we heard from Farah and Hannah Crawford from King's, and also I think one of the directors of the Globe. And it was kind of just a celebration of the relationship between King's and the Globe. It was nice to see all these familiar faces from the two institutions in the same room, socialising and chatting.
About 150 eventually. Yeah, it was a mix. It was students, it was a lot of VIPs from both institutions. The president of the college attended, the board of directors from the Globe, the board of trustees attended, and then they were MA.
My sense was that it was kind of a new collaboration between the two institutions, which wanted to make that relationship closer, but also wanted to prioritise certain things like social justice and anti-racism.
One of the things that most excites me about our continued collaboration with the Globe and the creation of our new research centre is the opportunity really to open up Shakespeare studies, open up research in early modern literature to as broad a range of people.
Farah, myself, and a couple of other students from around London, the London area, were working on establishing a network called the Early Modern Scholars of Colour Network.
So we want to look at that. We want to look at the relationship teachers have to these questions and how they present them in schools. And also thinking about the Globe more broadly, one of the things we've been wanting to do is to try to make Shakespeare much more accessible to a wider range of communities.
We're interested in all different facets of Shakespeare studies, from queer theory to critical race studies to performance to editing.
I think that the poetry night that we had during the Shakespearean Race Festival was most impactful for me as a Muslim woman. I just felt so seen in that moment. In a way I'd never felt before at the Globe, just because you sort of feel a little bit out of place all the time.
I think these collaborations really demonstrate how Shakespeare's poetry can engage audiences of all ages and backgrounds.
I think that this project is fantastic because it's really thinking about how we use Shakespeare in a more inclusive and accessible way.
It is about protection, but it's also about securing a different legacy for Shakespeare, because the legacy of Shakespeare that we have was the one invented in the 18th century, which is unhelpful because that was the same time as England was getting more and more powerful and wealthy because of the slave trade. And so the fact that the rise of Shakespeare and the rise of the slave trade happened simultaneously really needs to be reckoned with.